I've got a large group of them. All of my animals are unrelated. I've got a real diverse group. I work with a number of zoos and exchange animals with them. I work with the Turtle Survival Alliance, and basically trying to produce enough animals to have an assurance colony.
I'm here with Dan Pearson, and we're going to learn a little bit about radiated tortoises today because I love them. I don't know much about them, and you're going to tell us about these things. First of all, where do these things come from? What part of the world?
So these guys come from Madagascar, which is an island off the east coast of Africa. Wow, that's a little yearling animal.
That is beautiful.
So this is Madagascar has just a few tortoise species, and they're all critically endangered. They have spider tortoises, the flat-tailed tortoises, the radiated tortoise, and a connexie species as well as the plowshare tortoise, which is one of the most endangered tortoises in the world. The radiateds are the closest relative to the plowshare, and this is a species that was formerly fairly widespread on Madagascar in appropriate habitat, but because of habitat loss, slash and burn agriculture, some declines due to pet trade, due to smuggling, but mostly habitat loss, and people have started eating these tortoises.
Eat these things, huh?
For many, many decades, for centuries, the native peoples of Madagascar have had a sort of a taboo, it's called a fatty, about not harming tortoises. And that has started to break down in the last few decades as people have emigrated from mainland Africa, and people have started that sort of traditional protection of native tortoises has broken down in the country. And then there's also a lot of, again, slash and burn agriculture that's causing a lot of habitat loss.
Are these things imported anymore, or they're restricted?
They're restricted, but there's a large, black market trade in them. The TSA, the Turtle Survival Alliance, which is a group that I work with, does a lot of work in country with some of the confiscated animals, trying to repatriate them to the wild. But these were imported into the U.S. back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s before the Endangered Species Act came into play. So there's a group of wild-caught animals that are 50, 60 years old here in the U.S.
Wow.
Sort of formed a basis for a captive population in
breed
the U.S. I do. I've got a large group of them. All of my animals are unrelated. I've got a real diverse group. I work with a number of zoos and exchange animals with them. I work with the Turtle Survival Alliance, and basically trying to produce enough animals to have an assurance colony. So if it comes, hopefully not, but if they were to go extinct in the wild, we have animals that could be repatriated at some point in the future.
Do these live outside at your place?
They do. I live in Florida, so I've got heaters for the wintertime, and the adults all live outside. The climate in the summer in Florida is very similar to the wet season in Madagascar, including hurricanes.
Oh, really? They get hurricanes? I didn't realize that.
Same type of, they're east coast of Africa, and the hurricanes come in and make a mud pit out of the place.
What about the winter? How cold do these normally get in Madagascar?
They can drop down into the 50s.
Oh,
even in some points, get down into the 40s.
Do you have a heat box, like a house that they can go into?
I use these Rubbermaid little containers with ceramic heat emitters and thermostats, and I've got wireless thermometers so I can monitor the temperature.
Do you take them all in, and when it gets cold, or do you just let them do their own thing?
They pretty much do their own thing, because if it's sunny in the daytime, even if it's in the 60s, they'll come out and bask and raise their body temperature up. My goal is to not let the nighttime temperatures go below 50, and so the heaters allow them to do that.
How long do these things live usually?
Certainly, I think the oldest one on record, well over 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean.
So they are a long-living tortoise.
They are.
How big do these things get?
They get probably the biggest one I've had is about 35 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Big female, about that big.
So these are babies.
Yeah, this is only a 3-year-old.
And how old do they have to be before they breed?
Typically, earliest would be about 8 to 10 years. About 28 centimeters is kind of minimum for adulthood.
How old are they usually before you can sex them, accurately?
Usually about 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
You sell these, what do you sell them unsexed?
Yeah. I mean, they are temperature determined during sex determination during the incubation temperature. So if you do it at higher levels, you can get more females.
And what's the best thing to feed these guys?
Well,
I always thought I was feeding my turtles the right stuff, and then I find I was giving them too much,
right.
Too much certain foods.
The best thing is basically native browse.
Grass.
Weeds, broadleaf weeds.
They're healthy for them, huh?
They do. They need a lot of fiber. They love puncha cactus, hibiscus. They'll graze on grass. So I have large outdoor pens with a grazing area for them, and then I supplement that with some produce, some lettuces, some fruits and vegetables, mineral supplements. They love Missouri tortoise chow.
They do. Okay, all right. So that's okay to feed them.
It's called tortoise crack, and we use that as a supplement. It's it's got a nice balanced. Has a good calcium phosphorus ratio, and so I give them that about once a week.
And what should you avoid with these tortoises?
Well,
Spinach and stuff like that?
Yeah, spinach in moderation. I mean, tortoises eat a lot of things that are toxic to other animals.
Okay.
And so they're
hear too much protein in like spinach and stuff.
Yeah, the protein can be an issue just because it affects their internal organs. But high fiber, plants with oxalates in moderation. You don't want to feed a lot of spinach, but certainly kale and collards all have some oxalates in them. So it's basically a diverse diet. And so I have large outdoor pens where they're grazing on a variety of grasses and different weed species that come in. And then I supplement that with stuff that I collect from the yard. Plus they get some grocery store produce. But the big thing is just a lot of bulk, a lot of fiber,
You heard it, guys. Now, how come these are only being able to be sold within Florida? That's what I wanted to know.
Going back to the 1970s when they enacted the Endangered Species Act, this was one of the first tortoise species to be placed on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's endangered species listing. And it was an animal that was in the trade at the time, and I think they kind of put that on there as a preventative measure. At that time, the population...
Between states.
Right. The population had not crashed in Madagascar at that time. Certainly now it is a species that really is imperiled in its native range. And so it needs to be on an endangered list. So what that does is you have to, in order to do interstate commerce, because the federal government only controls interstate commerce, so in order to sell an animal across the state line between states, both people have to be permitted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I have a captive bred wildlife permit that allows me to do that. But in recent years, they have started issuing very many fewer of those. So I don't necessarily have to find having another person in another state to sell to. So it's mostly in-state sales, which the federal government does not regulate. So,
Love them. Thank you so much for educating us, Dan.
sure.